This is part 2 of the Side Kick Series, and I'm going to give you a few tips this time about the leg movements in that. The first video, I'm going to put a link to that underneath this video. The first video was talking about the support, so the side that you're lying on. Now we're going to talk about the leg that's moving. Now one thing that you'll have to remember right away from the start is that the Side Kick Series is still about spinal stability and about hip mobility, right? So we want to, the important part is to be able to move your leg independently from your pelvis and your spine. So we're going to lie on the side, and you can really choose any of the positions of your arm down here. I'm going to bend my elbow and rest my head down. That's the most comfortable for me. And you can also choose any position that I showed you in the first video of the lower leg. So I'm going to take my bottom leg just 45 degrees forward, gives me just a little bit more help with my balance. And the top leg I'm going to keep straight, in a nice straight line. So the first variation here that you have probably done is kicks forward and back, right? Now, the movement should happen from your hip joint, which is below your hip bone. So if you find your front hip bone here, the movement happens just a little bit below. What happens very, very often in the beginning is that we, as the leg comes forward, the spine rounds. As the leg goes back, the spine arches. So I'm really exaggerating right now for you to notice that a little bit. So now if you see that the pivoting point of the movement is actually around the navel. Now my navel comes forward, now my navel goes back, right? So that's what it shouldn't be. We should be keeping the whole torso, the whole trunk, all the way down to the pubic bone in a straight line, and the movement back and forth happens in your hip joint, okay? All right. Another thing that happens very often is that your upper body starts to counterbalance. So when the leg goes forward, the shoulder falls back. When the leg goes back, the shoulder falls forward. And again, I'm obviously always exaggerating so that you can see what I'm talking about. But even if it only happens a little bit like that, right, that means that your thigh is sort of stuck to your pelvis and it cannot move freely. It should be moving on its own, independently from your pelvis. Great. And then we have, you can also do movement where you lift the leg and lower the leg. Now again, the movement should happen from your hip joint, which is down here, and not from your center, so not the area of the navel. You can think of creating a little pocket of air under your bottom side waist, so between the floor and your waist here. And I usually like to wrap my hand around, sort of hug my own ribcage or waist, and remind myself to lift it up as I'm lifting my leg. And then I actually start to feel the muscles here in my butt, on the outside of my thigh, my hip, my gluteus medius and minimus working. Okay. Very common mistake to turn the toes up. When you turn the toes up, you're working your hip flexor, which most of the time we don't want, but what happens even more is that your pelvis will roll back as you lift it up. Okay? So you want to keep the pelvis forward, keep the pocket of air underneath, and then lift. And that the leg should feel much, much heavier. Now you can obviously do a lot of combinations, so you can do circles, right? There's a lot of creativity how you can move your leg. Circle is circumduction, so you're moving your hip joint in all directions, which also challenges your center and your spine in all directions. So when you bring the leg forward, your spine wants to round. When you bring the leg up, you want to collapse in the waist. When you bring the leg back, your shoulder wants to come forward. So now my body has to react much quicker as the direction of my leg changes to create the appropriate stiffness, and that's a term we use to describe disability in your joints. So your torso has to be ready for that leg switching direction very, very quickly. Okay, so it's a matter of timing. Of course you can circle the other way too. And there's plenty more variations for the legs. You can do a bicycle, bending the knee, then extending and back. Okay? You can obviously reverse the bicycle. You can also do passé, where the legs turn out, développé, bring them together. Keep your hips stacked, keep the pocket of air. So, again, one last time, the movement happens in your hip joint all the way down here. Nothing happens between your pubic bone, your lower abdominal wall, and your chest. Stays completely still. Okay? So I hope that was helpful today, giving you some tips about what to watch out for in the Side Kick series. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.